All right, we're not going to do the intro thing. We're jumping straight into this. We have hit piece number 4, I believe, in a series of 5. Whoops, I need to mute that. All right, and yeah, here we go. We're just going to jump straight into this. It's going to be a good one. Haven't read this yet, so we'll see. Why VA pays more in disability for sleep apnea than it does for some lost limbs. Just posted. All right. Over decades, the government has spent billions on disability payments for veterans with sleep apnea, a common condition that interrupts breathing during sleep and causes fatigue. In early 22, officials were determined to pare that back. Medical advances mean most apnea. Very good. Medical advances mean most apnea sufferers now have a few or no symptoms and can hold jobs. So Dennis McDonough, then the Secretary of the Department of Veteran Affairs, announced a proposal to change the benefit system to reflect the new reality and going forward, slash monthly checks for many veterans. Okay, off the bat, doesn't make any sense because in 38 CFR, you are protected. So no one's benefits are getting slashed. Okay. Off the bat. And then it says it went nowhere. And I'm just going to assume that she doesn't understand how long VA SRD changes take and how long they have taken historically. The episode was the latest failed attempt to rein in the $193 billion disability program in the era of modern medicine. Also, it's not a budget concern when it comes to changing the VA SRD. That's Washington Post concern because they want to destroy veteran benefits and VA disability compensation. But that's not the concern about VA SRD changes. The VA SRD changes is in line with the most medical advances for the given condition. So the framework, the mindset you would need to have to speak accurately on sleep apnea VA SRD changes is off from the get-go. It's off from the very beginning. Even as once debilitating ailments become manageable for most patients, the government has repeatedly backed away from updates that would anger veterans and their supporters, the Washington Post found. Yeah, the VA doesn't care about that, by the way. They're going to make changes when they are ready to make changes. Approved sleep apnea claims have exploded, growing more than 11-fold from 09 to 04, VA data shows. Last year, about 660,000 veterans collected disability benefits for sleep apnea, up from 57,000 in 2009. It's created a catch-22 all the way around, said retired Army Lieutenant General James Terry Scott, who led a presidential commission starting in 04 to assess the disability system. The gist was things the government should do to get a grip on sleep apnea, Scott said of his commission's focus, but people have learned the easy way out is to find in favor of the veteran. McDonough's plan would substantially reduce payments for the condition, now typically $1,100 a month or higher, a larger sum that most veterans receive for a leg amputated below the knee. And here lately, we've been seeing a distinction between veteran and combat veteran. We saw that with Lieutenant Colonel Gade in his opening statement and really all of his statements. And we see the same theme with Washington Post. And if you remember yesterday's article where they made a distinction between combat Craig's service in Turkey and not being a combat veteran, and he never claimed in the manner of which they were trying to draw the conclusion from, that's not what was being talked about. And so there is a clear distinction that Washington Post is trying to make between veteran and combat veteran. And we see that with sleep apnea and a amputated below the knee. At a February 22 news conference, the secretary said VA was modernizing its disability system, which had changed little since World War II. Okay. That's McDonough, previous VA secretary. McDonough also proposed more stringent standards for claims for tinnitus, a persistent ringing in the ears, new rules for mental health claims, including PTSD, would require veterans to know how it affects their lives at home or work. Veterans and their advocates were furious. They flooded the Federal Register, which listed the proposed rule changes with thousands of angry comments. I demolished my body for the country, one veteran wrote, and what does the country do for me? Things like this. The changes for tinnitus and sleep apnea are unfavorable. People think the changes for mental health are favorable. I don't think so at all. And I don't want to get into that, but I don't think they're favorable at all. And I'm actually confused at how people think they are favorable. Anyways, the disability benefit system was meant to be a social safety net for returning service members whose combat wounds kept them from working. Today, today it's overrun with dubious and exaggerated claims that have little to do with military service. A post-investigation published in October found VA approves millions of claims for common diseases of aging, including diabetes and conditions related to high blood pressure and hardening of the arteries. A booming for-profit industry coaches veterans to exploit the system for bigger payouts, the Post found. Their word choice here is pretty heavy, dude. Pretty heavy word choice. Most veterans don't even know that they're eligible to claim VA disability, nor do they understand the evidentiary requirements to claim a VA disability. And evidence wins the way. There's no exploiting the system, okay? Exploiting the system equals fraud, and if you commit fraud, you'll be prosecuted and convicted. Benefits are granted based on a system that rates individual elements on a scale from 0 to 100. Veterans often claim multiple conditions, combining these ratings until they reach 100. That threshold, with its large payout and other perks such as property tax breaks and free healthcare and dental care, is hyped by for-profit claims consultants as the holy grail. Who is saying this? Right? If we're going to put it in quotes, who is saying that? The vast majority of veterans awarded for benefits for sleep apnea and prescribed treatment for it receive a disability rating of 50% for that condition alone, according to VA officials. In contrast, most veterans who have a leg amputated below the knee or blindness in one eye are rated at or below 40%. They're also on SMC, you big dummy. Indira, I don't know, okay? A professor of medicine at the University of Pennsylvania and sleep medicine specialist at the Philly VA Medical Center said veterans have become savvy on social media to the generous benefits for sleep apnea. I'll say this, okay, before we go further, there is an argument that the Post should create. It's on the secondary basis there. I'm curious if that's what they're going to do. If I was a Washington Post, that's what I would argue is the secondary basis of sleep apnea when you look at correlative factors instead of causative factors. Anyways, let's see if they present at least somewhat of a decent argument. The common question I get is this compensable or not? I'm just going to say G, said, noting that some veterans ask her to test them for it. A lot of the time they tell me, I know someone who got rated for this. McDonough's proposal would not affect the disability rating or compensation of veterans already receiving benefits for sleep apnea, but monthly payments would be slashed, often down to $0 for new claims when symptoms are successfully treated. I don't like how they know the information, but that's not what they put up top. Anyways, at the time, VA officials were optimistic that there was no political will to adjust the system. I've learned over the time that I've been in this role never to predict when a particular rule will be published, but I think we're very, very close. Then VA's Undersec for Benefits said in an interview with the Post a few weeks before President Joe Biden left office. But McDonough did not sign off on his own proposal before stepping down with the rest of the admin. Through a spokesperson, he declined to comment on why he did not give the final green light. Jacobs also declined to comment. Under the Trump admin, the plan is still pending almost 4 years later. In recent months, the admin has signaled that it may implement some or all of the changes by the end of the year. In September, officials moved the proposal to the final rule stage in the Federal Register. I'm going to assume they mean September of this year, which is incorrect, okay? Because it was in the final rule stage since April of 24. Don't quote me on that, but it was definitely beginning the first half of 2024, if not earlier. So again, they said something that is not true, and it lacks any sort of solid research. Okay. In fact, I mean, I could find that in 2 seconds. Let's see. Oh, look, here it is. Idiots. Absolutely idiots. I'm no investigative journalist. I'm just a dude in my basement that knows where to go to find the information. Dummies, dude. Anyways, McDonough's successor, Douglas A. Collins, was sworn in February. He declined to be interviewed for this article. Well, gee, I wonder why. Pete Kay, a VA spokesperson, did not respond to written questions about whether the department planned to change disability compensation for sleep apnea. In an emailed statement, Kay said VA has been in the process of modernizing the benefit system since the first Trump admin and plans to conclude the effort during the president's second term. Kay said VA is working on updates to respiratory, ear, nose, throat, mental disorders, and neurological conditions, and convulsive disorders. Parkinson's is a big part of this one here. Looking at the general rating formula, by the way. Symptoms that include sleep apnea, PTSD, tinnitus, and among other ailments. Once complete, this will be the first total update of the schedule since 1945. There's 15 schedules. 11 of them have already been updated. These are the last 4. He said in the email, he added, while the far left Washington Post objective is to smear disabled American veterans as crooks and liars and cut their benefits, VA's goal is precisely the opposite. We want to simplify access to VA benefits and healthcare and make it easier for veterans to get what our nation owes them. You know what? This is going to make a lot of people mad. But dare I say the VA is standing up for veterans in that comment. While the far left Washington Post objective is to smear disabled American veterans as crooks and liars and cut their benefits, VA's goal is precisely the opposite. We want to simplify access to VA benefits and healthcare and make it easier for veterans to get what our nation owes them. As they wait to see what the government will do, veterans are filing a flurry of claims for sleep apnea benefits. The VBA, the division of VA that handles disability compensation, approved 150,000 more claims. Okay, I don't know if they're going to bring this up or not, but when you look at sleep apnea, there's a TARA connection there as well. And so that's definitely an increase in claims, is the PACT Act from the TARA. It's not presumptive. Don't twist my words when you look at toxic exposure. And I'm curious if they're going to bring up the secondary argument, because I do think, for what the Post is saying, the secondary sleep apnea argument is a good argument. Now, I don't like it personally, but I do think it's the best argument to go forward with what they're trying to talk about when it comes to sleep apnea being a dumb VA claim. It's the most controversial condition right now, said Michelle Koper, a national service officer with DAV, a nonprofit group chartered by Congress that helps former service members claim benefits. Everyone wants to file for sleep apnea. Calls for action. Researchers estimate about 30 million Americans suffer from sleep apnea, although only about 6 million have been officially diagnosed. In middle age, it affects almost 1 in 4 men and 1 in 10 women. Being male and overweight are both risk factors for apnea, making the condition more prevalent in the veteran population, although research varies on how much. Are they saying that male veterans are fat? There's a lot of truth to that, right? You're on medication, maybe you have chronic pain, maybe you have double knee replacements. Like all of those are factors into weight gain. First identified as a medical condition in 1965, sleep apnea once was considered a dire diagnosis. Untreated, those who suffer from it often wake up gasping because their airways has collapsed, blocking the flow of oxygen into their lungs. The disorder can cause snoring, daytime drowsiness, high blood pressure, and in rare cases, heart failure or stroke. The intro into the 80s of the commercially available continuous positive airway pressure machine, or CPAP, allowed the vast majority of apnea sufferers to find relief from their symptoms and lead normal lives. The bedside device sends a stream of air through a nasal mask and tube to keep the airway open, allowing people to wake up rested and work a normal day. The device also has been shown to reduce the risk of death and some medical conditions, including high blood pressure, in those with severe apnea, research shows. It may also lower the risk of cardiovascular disease, said G, the Philly sleep specialist. VA added apnea to its list of ailments eligible for compensation in 1996, tying disability ratings to the severity of the disease. Veterans with mild symptoms are assigned a rating of 30%. Those with life-threatening complications are designated 100%. The government not only assigned apnea a high rating scale, but also made it relatively easy for veterans to get their claims approved. I will say this: sleep apnea is not an easy claim to get approved if it's secondary. It's not at all. Unlike private insurers, VA grants benefits regardless of whether a veteran uses a CPAP machine or other device that offsets their symptoms or mitigates them entirely. And VA doctors are not required to follow up to verify that a veteran actually uses the CPAP or other prescribed treatment. When the government created these rules nearly 3 decades ago, the CPAP was not as widely used or as effective at treating apnea as soon as it soon became, said David Shulkin, a physician who served as VA secretary for close to 14 months during the first Trump admin. As the field of sleep medicine grew, more doctors and clinics began offering breathing tests for apnea, and the CPAP became a household name, leading to a growth in claims. Federal officials and lawmakers began to question whether the disability benefit system was out of step with advances in medicine. In 2004, at the height of the War on Terror, President Bush appointed a 13-member commission of retired senior military officials to conduct a reassessment. It was the first modern effort to examine the rating rules since they were developed in 1945. This right here was brought up during last week's Senate hearing directed to the VSOs. If you remember that, I forgot who said it. It was a Republican senator, but they asked about a commission for this exact thing right here, but today. In 1955, President Eisenhower became concerned about the growing cost of veterans' care after the Second World War, when former service members and their families made up a large share of the U.S. population. Oh my goodness, it's almost like the country has money to send 18, 19, 20-year-olds to die, but they don't have the money to take care of those same 18, 19, 20-year-olds when they're older. Crazy how that works. He appointed a commission led by 5-star Army general and World War II hero Omar Bradley to recommend savings in the disability system and other benefits for veterans. In 1956, the commission urged limiting benefits to only the most wounded and ill former service members, but pushback from veterans groups and politicians blocked any traction. Again, we're talking about combat and non-combat here. The Bush panel came back in 2007 with a 562-page report shared with Congress, the White House, and VA leaders urging an overhaul. I made a short yesterday about the attacks on veteran benefits from the Washington Post, and this article is right in line with that. Okay, that we're becoming the new target, that we are sucking up all the American payer tax dollars. Right? It was Congress and lobbyists, and then became federal workers, and now it's veterans. The report called on the government to provide a better treatment and higher compensation to veterans with PTSD and TBIs. It also emphasized that the disability rating system had not accounted for advances in science, medicine, and technology, as well as changes in the nature of work that have occurred in the past 62 years, which potentially affect the extent to which disabilities limit earning capacity. Really quick, I'm going to go back to this. I've ordered it, and you can look at final rule stage and just see how many changes there have been. We're in 22. Okay, you can go all the way back. I'm just going to hit last now, all the way back to 1995. And so the VA SRD has been updated and changed. There's 39 pages of this many times. These are the last four: mental, neuro, and this is a double. This is auditory and respiratory. 1, 2, 3, 4. So food for thought. It has been updated. The intent was to modernize and get the subjectivity out of the claims review, recalled Scott, the retired general who led the effort. The commission recommended that VA conduct a broad review of the ratings it assigned to disabilities, including sleep apnea, to make sure they align with medical advances. Congress held hearings, and lawmakers pushed VA to follow through, but little came of it. The wars in Afghanistan and Iraq had intensified. Troops went on multiple deployments. The government turned its attention to helping soldiers returning with TBIs and PTSD receive compensation and treatment, Scott said. Concerns about excesses in other areas were largely sidelined, he said. In the following years, both the GAO, Congress's watchdog arm, and the VAIG's office criticized the agency for neglecting to modernize the disability system. In 2008, Congress made the Bush Disability Commission permanent, with a mandate to advise the Secretary on how the rating system could be brought into the 21st century. In reality, the Commission removed only a small number of obsolete disabilities, such as scurvy, and made other inconsequential changes, according to Daniel Gade, who served on the panel from 2008 to 2013. I'm not going to use any words here. Okay, you can just infer. Gade, a decorated Army officer who lost his right leg on a deployment to Iraq in 2004 and co-wrote the book Wounded Warriors: How Bad Policy is Making Veterans Sicker and Poorer, said the panel's unstated goal was to boost ratings and disability payments. The only way that any benefit ever removes is in the direction of greater benefits, Gade said in an interview. He recalled that the director of DAV told him at the time that if one veteran loses $1 in the process of modernization, then DAV will be opposed. In an interview with the Post, Randy Reese, then a senior official with the Veterans Organization and now executive director of its Washington office, said he is opposed to any reductions in benefits for sleep apnea because its symptoms, whether treated or not, can affect every part of a veteran's life. Some leg amputations, Reese said, are not as disabling. If you have a prosthetic leg, you can still work. There's not a single case of sleep apnea that doesn't affect your ability to work. I think so that's weird, okay? I think what is being said is that if treatment is going to be used to lower a VA rating, then the argument made, which I wouldn't make it, but what I see being made is that this is a treatment that works, and obviously Gade, I assume, has a lot of money. Right, and so if you're going to use that argument, then it should apply across the board. I think that's not the argument I would make again, but I think that's what the argument is being made. Thank you for that. Thank you for your channel and advocacy for veterans. I live in a lower cost country abroad and value the benefits such as FMP Simplify. Hey, T-Mac, thank you very much, man. I definitely appreciate that. For real. Down the rabbit hole. By President Barack Obama's second term, the Disability Commission had become alarmed by an outside growth in sleep apnea claims. VA data shows that from 2009 to 2012, awards for the condition had doubled. It's almost like the things we were exposed to. It's almost like things we were exposed to had something to do with sleep apnea, which are why veterans are getting it connected via Terra right now. Almost. Sleep apnea has become more prevalent over several decades, in part because of rising rates of obesity, a known risk factor for developing the condition, according to recent research. To receive disability benefits, a veteran must prove that their illness or injury is service-connected, meaning that it began or worsened during the time in the military. That's not what that means, by the way. That is direct. This is aggravation. They're still secondary. So direct aggravation, secondary. There's Terra, there's presumptive time location, and then MUC-MI. And these are obviously PACT Act related. But if a veteran can show that an improved condition had led to other problems, even decades after leaving the service, VA will rate those elements as secondary and award additional benefits. There we go. They're secondary. In the case of sleep apnea, a buddy letter from another service member they served with or a spouse can vouch for a history of snoring is sometimes enough. Okay. Let me just be clear here. And Kish, if you're in here, please weigh in. A buddy letter saying that you snore is not going to be good enough to connect sleep apnea direct. It's definitely not going to be good. It means nothing for secondary, by the way. Because a buddy letter on a secondary sleep apnea service connection means absolutely dog water. What matters the most is your current diagnosis, obviously verified by sleep test, and then the given nexus for the secondary. So this is wrong. This is I watched someone on YouTube who doesn't know what they're talking about talk about buddy letters, and I'm going to put it in an article because I'm the Washington Post. That's exactly what that is. During this time, service organizations and staffers who process disability claims say tens of thousands of veterans began filing for sleep apnea, saying it resulted from the PTSD they were already rated for. Vets know it's highly rated, said Ryan Gallucci, executive director of the Washington office of VFW, one of the oldest VSOs chartered by Congress of the spike in sleep apnea claims. Gallucci acknowledged that the perception can be that people are exaggerating, and said he felt conflicted that some veterans receive benefits for apnea that developed years after they left the military. You could say, how far down the rabbit hole are we going? That is, if you have chronic PTSD and you're on medication and that medication causes you to gain weight, or you have chronic pain like knee replacements and stuff like that cause you to gain weight, you are going to develop sleep apnea probably. And that could be in 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years. So how far down the rabbit hole are we going to go? Whatever the medical consensus is given in the medical opinion, that's how far we're going to go. The Disability Commission in 2014 called in a group of sleep experts for a briefing to address the surge in claims. Scott and Gade were called. Convinced that VA was being too generous with these claims, the commission sent an urgent recommendation to Allison Hickey, then the Undersec for benefits. It suggested that VA lower the sleep apnea rating and thus shrink monthly checks for veterans whose symptoms improved with treatment. Hickey declined to comment for this article. VA did not act on the recommendation at the time. That year, the issue reached then Senator Tom Coburn, who had become a powerful voice on government waste and spending. He scrutinized the growth in sleep apnea awards in the Waste Book, his annual compilation of federally funded programs that he said represented government waste. Exploding claims of sleep apnea threatened to bankrupt VA disability program, read the Waste Book headline. Military personnel diagnosed with sleep apnea are given 50% rating, and some believe it's causing an explosion of abuse in VA's disability program, Coburn wrote. The VA itself has acknowledged the surge in sleep apnea claims and taken steps to study the situation, but denies that there's any abuse in the system and defends the 50% rating. But critics allege the increase is nothing more than a scam on the VA disability system that takes resources away from veterans who are truly disabled. In 2016, nearly a decade after Bush's commissions urging the benefits admin began its review of the disability rating and compensation system, officials promised to analyze every condition that was eligible for benefits and to recommended changes. Federal watchdogs continued their drumbeat. In 2020, the VAIG's office found in an audit that almost half of the 250,000 veterans issued CPAP or other device to treat sleep apnea from October 16 to May of 18 used it less than half the time. Auditors said VA was on track to lose more than $261 million over 5 years on treatment supplies that veterans would not use. 2 years later, McDonough announced he had a plan. Like it or not, I think that's a good argument. I don't like it. I'm just saying. I do think it's a good argument. If I was going to be on their side, I would use this and I would harp on secondary. All the other stuff they talked about is nonsense. That's the two I would stick with. Changes in backlash. The proposal pending in the Fed Reg takes into account, for the first time, sleep apnea's responsiveness to treatment. Fully treated, the condition will be rated at 0%, as would an asymptomatic case, and the current 30% rating would be eliminated. It's like 0, 10, 50, 100. VA would assign ratings above 10 only when treatment is ineffective or isn't advised because of another ailment. And a 100% rating would be granted only in rare cases when the disorder compromises vital organs. The new rules would incorporate modern medical data and terminology to provide veterans with more accurate and consistent decisions, McDonough said in a statement at the time. VA would still pay for veterans' medical care as well as CPAPs and other devices, but it would impose more stringent requirements to prove that apnea causes significant limitations beyond fatigue. To qualify for benefits, overweight veterans would need to show that they had tried to lose weight to manage the condition. The proposed updates would also put guardrails around PTSD and tinnitus. These commonly claimed conditions afflict many veterans, from troops who served stateside to those who deployed combat zones. But because diagnoses for both disorders rely on self-reported symptoms, disability experts say they are vulnerable to exaggeration or fraud. About 34%. So it's crazy because GAO, OIG, and Daniel Gade himself said that this is extremely small. Very, 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 very small. About 34% of veterans received disability benefits in 24, up from 9% in 01. In that time frame, the veteran population decreased by a third. Since 03, tinnitus has ranked as the most commonly compensated claim with a $3.2 million award last year alone. According to VA data, more than half of veterans with a disability rating receive benefits for the condition. Tinnitus carries a relatively low rating at 10%, but is often touted by for-profit companies and influencers as a step toward achieving a 100% rating. I've said this a billion times, and I'll say it again. Tinnitus is a, we see those videos. Tinnitus can get you 100%. I'm telling you, that's not good. No, sir. Tinnitus would be downgraded from a standalone condition to an underlying symptom of hearing loss. Not just hearing loss, it would be other conditions as well. A change that critics say would jeopardize the benefit for many veterans who suffer from it. Meanwhile, more than 1 in 4 disabled veterans, or nearly 1.6 million, received monthly compensation for PTSD last year, a nearly 11-fold increase from 01, according to VA data. Oh my goodness, what would cause veterans to have PTSD that started in 01? The proposed rules would modernize how this and other mental health conditions are evaluated emphasizing the disorder's disruption to a veteran's life rather than on their professed feelings of anxiety and depression alone. Still, the new rules would result in higher payments to some veterans, and the minimum rating for mental health ailments would rise from 0 to 10. Federal law required VA to consider public comments for and against the proposed changes for 60 days after they were published in the Fed Reg. Among the 2,700 comments were those from veterans who said they would stop treating their sleep apnea if it meant their monthly check would be cut. This is absolutely ridiculous. How do people sleep at night? One commenter who identified herself as a veteran wrote, definitely without a mask or sleep apnea, that's for sure. Another wrote, I am just appalled that every time I try to submit a claim, the VA tries to pass something that takes away from the combat veterans. Major advocacy groups, including VFW and the National Organization of Veterans Advocates, the NOVA, issued blistering statements accusing VA of relying on inaccurate or dated research to justify the changes. The American Tinnitus Association assailed the plan as a blatant attempt to reduce costs at the expense of our veterans with tinnitus who depend and deserve on disability benefits. As VA keeps the door open, for-profit claims company and VA staff alike are urging veterans to maximize their benefits. Brian Reese, the founder of VA Claims Insider, warned his more than 155,000 YouTube subs in August video to act with urgency and file your claim immediately before any changes take effect. They really don't like this guy. Also, there's nothing wrong with veterans taking advantage of the benefits that they've earned. Inside the Veterans Club at the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally in South Dakota, again, I'm going to skip through a lot of this. Some of this was in yesterday's article. 29 minutes later, got it. CPAP. He filed a claim. Earlier this year, VA turned down Smith's sleep apnea claim. Benefits officials told him there was insufficient evidence in his Navy record that he had sought help for the condition while in service, he said, and there was absolutely no sleep test or anything to treat me back then. He's determined to try again, Schmitz said, and he is attempting to get in touch with a sailor he served with, hoping he'll write a buddy letter on his snoring. And he's going to be denied again, by the way, because the notion that a buddy letter saying that you're snoring is going to connect sleep apnea direct is absolutely stupid. Then he plans to contact his local rep for DAV to file a new claim. Oh, that's it. That's the end. I don't know, man. What are my thoughts on this? So here's the argument that I would have used is that sleep apnea has a 50% rating. It's treatable. And their proposed changes. And a lot of veterans claim it because it can be secondary. And so it doesn't require evidence directly from service. But the secondary, in a way, requires evidence directly from service because it has to be secondary, right? So you have to have PTSD, maybe obesity as an intermediate step. Bada bing, bada boom. That's how most veterans get connected for sleep apnea. The issue with that is the obesity has to be recognized for service as well. So maybe you've been on 20 years of medication for PTSD that has caused you to gain weight. Therefore, your obesity is recognized. And then boom, that's how it's connected secondary. There's also TARA, which they did not mention a single time in this article, that a lot of veterans, Iraq veterans in like the 03-ish time frame, are getting sleep apnea connected via TARA. And TARA is like a combination of direct and secondary, right? It's direct because it's directly from service. It's secondary because of the exposure. That's a good way to think of it. But the connection basis is TARA. And it turns out that when you send 18, 19-year-old kids to fight in a war that's unwinnable, that starts in 2001 and that ends in the Abbey Gate incident with more service members dying over 20 years later, losing their lives. Turns out that you got to pay for that. All right. But yes, the best argument that they could have went with, and I'm surprised they didn't double down on it, was the secondary aspect. They mentioned it, but not as much as I would have. Yeah, and we have Raider HQ. If you haven't checked out his channel, you absolutely should. I'm going to end this stream with that. Let me go to his channel. I'm going to link it for everyone. You should absolutely check out Raider HQ after dark. Yeah, those are my thoughts, man. Okay. Raider HQ. Anyways, hit piece number 4. I'll probably make more videos here at some point on my thoughts. And yeah, there's the thing in the chat. That's all I got. Peace. Have a good day.